Greetings, fellow travelers. Welcome to the 103rd episode of the RPG Cave. I am one of your hosts, the level 99 human archmage, Ryan Turford. I am joined, as always, by the level 99 elf medic, Mr. Garret Bland. Garret, how are you doing on this lovely, lovely Monday evening, good sir?
I'm doing good. This is Ryan, this is a very special episode, I think, because I never thought I would see the day where I would just complete a Final Fantasy game, but here we are. I did it, and it feels amazing. Now I'm a Final Fantasy stan. I am ready to play all the other ones, including the hit MMO Final Fantasy XI that's still going on the Xbox 360. So definitely do that. Yeah.
Or just pull out your PS2 with your PS2 hard drive on it, because it was the only game, of course, in North America that used the PS2 hard drive besides Monster Hunter. And then you could, use your dial-up connection to connect to the internet and play Final Fantasy XI on
Man, that was a thing.
2.
Wait, a PS2 had that? The dial-up going on? Okay, cool.
It didn't support Ethernet access. It only had
a
dial-up port.
360 was the first was it the original Xbox that had
original Xbox?
Yes, that one pushed. It's like, hey, you definitely need a Ethernet port, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it was the first one with one, because the GameCube also had a network adapter for Phantasy Star Online too, and it also required dial-up.
Oh, I totally had that for sure. Yeah, I totally played online on the GameCube. Yeah.
I mean, it was the only GameCube game that actually supported that accessory. So they wanted to have more, but none of that. There just weren't enough online games for the GameCube.
Split screen was the thing on GameCube and everywhere else. So
I remember playing games of Red Faction 2 on the GameCube, which was a first-person shooter, and we were doing 4-player deathmatch at split screen, because of course that was the only way you could really play it. Whereas people over at Xbox were playing that game in 720p online with 16 other friends and stuff like that.
720p was a thing, man. Whoa, how sharp that was.
Yeah,
HD.
If you got those Xbox component cables, Garret, you'd be able to experience games. You'd be able to experience the games in 720p or 1080i with certain titles.
Well, so was it upgraded cable, cables with the Xbox?
Okay. Well, so the console itself was powerful enough to output, because all the consoles at that time were either 480i or 480p. But with the Xbox, it was such a powerful system internally that it was able to, bring play the games at native resolutions above 480p, because it was so powerful. So you had 720p for a lot of that original Xbox games, and then 1080i for 20 or 30 specific games, like Enter the Matrix,
including Halo
was one of them.
Was Halo one of them?
Halo was 720p.
So Halo 720p. Okay.
Which actually, in hindsight, with a progressive television, the way HD TVs are now, Garret, progressive is always better than interlace. So actually 720p actually gives you a better picture than 1080i, despite the fact that 1080i is a larger resolution because of the way that the image is interlaced.
I had one of those huge box TVs. It was literally wooden boards. That wrapped around this thing. It was a behemoth.
Goodness. Wrapped around your HD TV or your CRT?
It was an HD TV at the time. I did have a CRT in my toy room. I had my own toy room. So
so you guys must have had a rear projection TV, because my grandfather actually had one of those. That was the very first HD TV I had ever seen, was his rear projection HD TV. It was huge. It was gigantic. It was this 55-inch TV,
huge, man.
But it was this wide, on the audio.
It was a third of our living room, just boxed in a corner. We had surround sound speakers. It was good.
Yeah. Well, anyways, we should probably actually start talking about RPGs, because we're 5 minutes into the show, and we also have other things we need to talk about before we get into the topic du jour. But folks, if you're watching the show and you want to support us, of course, if you're watching the live stream, right meow over at youtube.com/carpoolgaming, or if you're watching the video on demand later, don't forget to smash that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you haven't hit that subscribe button already, let us know in the comments below what you think about Final Fantasy XVI, and also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever we go live with new videos. Also, if you're listening on the audio feeds, don't forget to rate us if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or maybe leave a little Apple Podcast review. All that stuff helps the show get discovered. Also, if you want one big audio feed with all the Carpool Gaming stuff on it or some exclusive content, like the Pants Patreon podcast for Patrons podcast that I recorded this week, or Carpool Gaming BTS, which we recorded over the weekend, head on over to patreon.com/Carpool Gaming. Throw a little tip in the old tip jar and out comes content. But Garrett, there's one other thing we need to get into before we get
dang.
That of course this is the one more thing. It's just like, at the end, when you get to the end of a really good press conference, Garrett, we got one more thing for you. We got one more thing, folks. This is actually going to be the last time that the RPG Cave meets for a little while in its traditional state, in its normal state. Because if you've been listening to Xbox Drive this week, or if you've been around on the Discord, I actually announced last week that I will actually be taking time off from Carpool Gaming for the next month, because here at Carpool Gaming we strive for providing a great mental health environment for all the hosts, and everyone's kind of been taking a break this year, and with all the big games coming out in September and October, Garrett, for me it just seemed like August was the best time for me to do that, just right before Starfield comes out. I think taking a break now is like, if I'm going to take one this year, like this is the best time for me to do that.
It's pretty quiet for games for me in August, for sure. Like, I'm not picking anything up until Sea of Stars. No joke. Yeah,
which hilariously, Garrett, I don't know if you saw my Twitter yesterday, because most people haven't been paying attention to this, because I didn't realize this until yesterday either. But Sea of Stars and Starfield come out on the same week. I didn't realize that.
I understand that, and I've been having a long thought about this, and I don't know about you, but I think I can wait a week on Starfield and just play. I think I can just
blasphemy from you, Garrett Bland, of all people.
I think I can play through Sea of Stars before I'm able to access Starfield, because once I have access to Starfield, it's game over for me. I need to play Sea of Stars beforehand. So
that's actually a good point, because I know like once, like you in particular, like definitely, like out of all the people on Carpool staff, like you're definitely the biggest Bethesda Game Studios fan. I just figured you'd be so excited for Starfield that you would not want to play anything, but you're playing the smart game here, Garrett, where you're trying to play, like, get the game out of the way first that you want to get out of the way before jumping into Starfield.
And I'm very excited for Sea of Stars as well. Also, Fallout 4. For me, Fallout 4, I played it like day one for me, but I actually didn't finish and beat and platinum the game until like a year later. I am a wait and see type of gamer. It's just whenever I'm in the mood, but Starfield is looking like my jam. It's going to be my September, October, November, December game, basically. Yeah. So I'm super down.
Yeah. And I know, and as Drellesh kind of points out in the chat, I know a lot of people are actually excited for Baldur's Gate 3 coming up this month as well.
Freaking nerds.
I am. Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm like, wait and see on this, because maybe I'll check out the console version when it comes to PlayStation. But even then, it's coming out the same week as Starfield's out. So it's just like, I don't know if I'm ever getting to this game this year. I mean, it might just be a next year game if it goes on sale kind of thing for me.
Dude, Baldur's Gate 3 is another type of Starfield time requirement. It's just so much. I just don't know. Baldur's Gate 3 is kind of a check out and see if I like it type of game. Actually, I would rather play the other CRPGs that are very popular and very cheap. Like I have Divinity Original Sin 2. Like I should play that a little more before I really get familiar with, or even the original Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 games that are out on Switch and PC as well. So
yeah. And I mean, I could also jump into Baldur's Gate, Garrett, but I have to finish 24 the game over.
Of course you do.
That takes top priority, of course. I mean, someone needs to find out what happens to Jack Bauer in this game
on your non-Ethernet ported PS2. Yes.
Yes,
you should.
Yes. It's one of those things where I wanted to stream it over the last 2 weeks, and I just didn't have the scheduling did not work out. So it will definitely be. I will be playing it over the break, and that's the game I'm telling people I'm playing over the break, Garrett. But I might actually play.
It shouldn't be long, right? It should be like Less than 10 hours.
I think I looked it up on how long to beat. I think it's like 7 hours, I think is what it's.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That's good.
Yeah, so it's not a very long game. So anyway, so getting back to what we were talking, because then we sidetracked a little bit from there. So RPG Cave will be going on audio feeds. What we're doing is we will actually have rerun episodes on the audio feeds. We actually, I went back and picked out, Garrett, my favorite 4 episodes of the RPG Cave.
That's nice. Okay.
And then I record like a little like kind of intro on them. And they're going to be on the audio feed. So you'll still get a little something on the audio feeds, but they will be old episodes. And I made sure to kind of target or put the emphasis on revisiting old episodes. Because I know we do have a lot of new listeners that haven't actually been, listening to all of our stuff. So that's a good way to catch up if you're brand new to the RPG Cave while we're away. And then, Garrett, I know you're not kind of ready to 100% confirm everything, but you have a couple other little things that are going to actually happen over my break as well. But
yeah. Well, I definitely want to plan it out. Like for sure, sometime next week, most likely Monday, like around this time, I will be doing some type of maybe a live stream or recording or whatever. I did play through Atelier Remake Murray, which is the first game that came out from the Atelier series, code provided by Koei Tecmo. Thank you very much. And yeah, I'll just go through it with my thoughts. And so, yeah, check out that sometime next week, most likely Monday. And then also the following week, an intended date for Thursday, the 17th, Matt's going to join me. And no, we're not going to do an RPG Cave, but we're going to do something the PC folks are going to like very much, maybe PC centric. So check it out.
Episode 1 of the PC Drive starring Garrett and Matt. Let's go.
Oh man, I probably not.
It's not actually going to be that, folks.
No.
People have been asking for the PC Drive for a long time, but
I know
it's not actually going to be that. But maybe it's like a sample of what the PC Drive could be.
It's a pilot, or like one of those seasonal shows. You just pop in every once in a while. Like me and him, we have a huge love for our Steam Decks. I'm really into like the PC portable handheld space. And I love getting into just PC just all around. So I think it would be good to just talk to him and see what, going through that. So that'd be great.
Yeah. And then I will return to the show, of course. My first show back will be September 4th. I will be back basically because I will be coming back Starfield Day because Sean and I will be planning something for Starfield Day on September 1st. So look out for details soon about that. And then we'll be back on September 4th, the Canadian long weekend. I might add, Garrett.
The what?
There's a long weekend here in Canada. That weekend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I think we have. Oh man, it's either Memorial Day or it's Labor Day. We have a Labor Day weekend.
I think it's the same weekend. I think it's the same weekend.
Yeah. I think they just lined it up on purpose.
Absolutely. So, Garrett, but yes. I know we're 14 minutes into the show and we haven't even got to the main topic yet. But we got a little side quest that I gotta at least have us venture on at least a little bit because I don't know if you've been keeping up with the news.
We love side quests.
Or all of my all caps tweets over on Twitter this week. Or I should say X. I apologize for calling it Twitter. It is in fact called X.
Please stop.
Hey, the website officially says X now. My app says X now, Garrett. That's what
it forced an update on my phone. I turned off auto enable update, type of deal on my phone, and it's still forced an update. I don't know what Android did. I don't know what Elon Musk paid millions of dollars to Google or whatever, their buddies. But man, my phone is now X, and I'm very sad. I can't rename or reskin the app too. I'm gonna have to root this phone in order to do that. So, anyways, that's a whole other side.
Anyways, getting back to what I was talking about. We got the big announcement, of course. The Final Fantasy XIV keynote happened this week. Which, by the way, they announced the brand new expansion for Final Fantasy XIV, Dawn Trail. It looks awesome. It looks like a summer vacation with all of our heroes. It's the beginning of a brand new storyline because they wrapped up kind of the original storyline for all the first 4 expansions and the base game with Endwalker, the last expansion. So they're starting from scratch. It looks like it's going to be like a heck of a good time. And of course, they announced during the showcase that it's finally coming to Xbox. And people got really, really excited about this, myself included, of course, where, we got this new expansion coming out next year because it's coming out next summer. We also have the game finally coming to Xbox, even though they told us multiple times that the game would never come to Xbox because they can't, solve the technical limitations that were preventing it from coming to Xbox. Now that we know that's coming early next year, we have a lot of new players that, of course, have been asking about, how do I get into this? How do I get into Final Fantasy 14? Like, where do I get started? Is Carpool Gaming maybe willing to help Sherpa new people into Final Fantasy 14? And I've got good news for you folks. I'm not ready to give the full details today because I don't have everything mapped out. Again, if you, some of the people I know who are watching right now have been in the Discord today and have already gotten some of these details already. But of course, if you're listening on audio feeds or whatnot, of course, I have thousands and thousands of hours in Final Fantasy 14. So and I play it on the regular all the time. So I would love to kind of put something together and kind of celebrate this launch coming to Xbox, but also just a lot of new people coming into the game. To kind of experience this brand new story. I think it's going to be really awesome. So first of all, we will be making a Carpool Gaming free company in Final Fantasy 14. Free companies are basically the name of guilds in Final Fantasy 14. So there will be one that I will be organizing later this year. Probably it will definitely be after my break, after I come back from break in September. Then this free company will be on a North American server. We are not planning on, I know, there are European servers, there are Oceanic servers, there's Japanese servers. Because the vast majority of our listeners and viewers are in North America, it just makes sense for us to make a North American server. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're doing. We'll most likely be on the Dynamis data center, most likely the World Seraph. This gives us a whole bunch of benefits like extra XP for brand new people in the game. It also gives it's the ability to buy a free company house. So we can actually have, Garrett, a Carpool Gaming house that we can all hang out in. I will make sure there's it's equipped with all of the crazy gadgets like a submarine and a stripper pole and a crazy disco ball. It's going to be great. You're going to love it. Also a chocobo chair. There's going to be a chocobo chair for people to go hang out on. And also we can travel to other North American servers if we want kind of faster queue times. And the focus of this is we're going to do a whole bunch of stuff together, whether it's raids, dungeons, just hanging out at the Carpool Gaming house. Like we'll set up parties maybe at the Carpool Gaming house. Cause I don't know if you knew this, Garrett, but in Final Fantasy 14, one of the things people like to do is have parties and organize parties in game at player housing. And they will invite 80 to 90 people on the server to just come hang out in this one location to come, hang out. Or a lot of times people turn their houses into nightclubs or, what's the PG word for this? Not so savory institutions where you go to, do things with other people. So yeah, they have lots of things like that in the games. We won't be doing anything to that extreme, but we will probably make it kind of like our Carpool Gaming party house. But all in all, I want it to be like a safe environment for people who want to jump in and get into Final Fantasy 14 with us. And I will actually be putting together some content. So if you're new and haven't actually picked up the game yet or tried it out, first of all, there's a free trial, so anyone can actually hop into that. But I will be actually making some videos when I return from my vacation that will instruct people on here's how you get started with the game. Here are the things I kind of recommend you do to kind of start out, breaking down all the different classes, things like that. So I'll have some starter stuff involved. So then that way we can, of course, have all this. But with all that out of the way, Garrett, I want to quickly touch on this. And this is the other reason I wanted to kind of bring this up because, lots of people ever since this got announced have been asking me about this particular question in particular. So on stage with Yoshi P, Phil Spencer was there with the president of Square Enix as well. Mm-hmm. And they said publicly on stage that this is the beginning of a brand new partnership with Xbox where more games from Square Enix will be coming to Xbox. In fact, the quote was that any game that they make will come to Xbox unless there are limitations that prevent it from doing so. Like that is the focus. They want everything that
good.
can be on Xbox will be on Xbox. So I want to hear from you, Garrett. What do you think about this news? Knowing, because even though you're not like a big Final Fantasy person, I know you love Square's games and you play on Xbox.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know what you think.
So, Square Enix has been a little bit more, well, definitely PlayStation centric because they're a Japanese company. They really serve a Japanese audience first and foremost, and that's their priority. It definitely makes sense. It kind of doesn't make sense where every other game I see like within this past year, it's like it's on Xbox or it's not on Xbox, and it's just like why? Like this is kind of weird. Even like a couple years ago, they had a semi push with Final Fantasy games and other Square Enix games to Game Pass, which was cool, and they kind of like let it off a little bit. And I'm glad Phil Spencer's kind of back to just say, hey, we are here for the Xbox audience and for the people that want to play Square Enix games on Xbox. I don't expect Square Enix games to come to Game Pass, or at least, brand new ones, of course.
Right.
Maybe older ones, or maybe coming from last year or this year or whatever for 4 to 6 months or something like that. Very typical. But yeah, so this screams to me, yes, most of Square Enix smaller games are gonna come over to Xbox. Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, those are the two big ones. I'm saying, it may or may not. Dragon Quest more likely to be on Xbox because Dragon Quest 11 was also on Xbox as well. I don't see that being exclusive. I don't see the point of paying money to be exclusive. Because it's a traditional. Well, we'll see how Dragon Quest 12 does, but it's more of a traditional Japanese role-playing game. It's like it doesn't make sense to pay it off for exclusivity. But other than like the mainline Final Fantasy games, I don't see any other game going like unless they're paid off by Sony to go to Xbox. So this is very positive, I think, overall.
I think so too. Like I feel like unless Sony is giving them the bag of money with the $sign on it, like they do with Final Fantasy 16, I think everything Square Enix puts out from now on comes to Xbox day and date. Like earlier this year, to the point where like we had a bunch of Square Enix releases this year, Garrett, like early in the year, and all of them skipped Xbox versus, in stark contrast to what we saw last fall, where almost every Square Enix game that came out last fall, when we had like a whole bunch of them come out, like they all came to Xbox. Like we had Star Ocean on Xbox. We had Dealful Chronicle.
We have Final Fantasy VII. What's the PSP remake again?
Crisis Core came to Xbox.
Crisis Core. Yeah.
The only ones we were missing were Valkyrie Elysium and Tactics Ogre were the only two we missed. So I think like we might see some of those come over. In fact, I think mark my words, Garrett. I'm looking at the calendar right now. I'm marking down your calendars. Ryan Turford says on July 31st, 2023, mark my words, Octopath Traveler 2 will be on Xbox before the year is over. 100%. I think it'll also come to PC, but I think a game like that is going to come to Xbox. I also wouldn't rule out something like Theatrhythm, Final Bar Line coming to Xbox before the year's out. Or even like some of the games that missed Xbox last year, like Valkyrie Elysium, like Tactics Ogre. I think we could see some of those come to Xbox as well. Like I think some of those are definitely going to happen at this point. And also, things could go the other way, Garrett. Like what if Microsoft, to Yarden's point kind of in the chat here, like what if Microsoft rolls up with the bag of money instead of Sony with some of this stuff? Like I'm curious to know what might actually happen with that. Like that's always a possibility going in the future too.
It would be, it would be very cool. I know Phil has been very interested in the Japanese studios and market, which is very intriguing to me, but it would be kind of cool to have a Xbox Japanese RPG exclusive game.
Yeah.
Like just to see how that would shake out. What would the audience react to it? How would it, react to Game Pass or whatever? Not a Final Fantasy game, of course, or like, these traditional series, but like just one JRPG that would have been exclusive for, let's just say, for a year, of course it'll probably just come other platforms, but it would be cool to see.
Definitely. It would be really interesting. So I know I know there will be more talk about this on Xbox Drive this week, but I wanted to talk about it a little bit here, especially because I'm not going to be on Xbox Drive this week because I will be, on my break at this point.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the co-host on Xbox Drive this week, I think people are going to be really excited for who is going to be filling in for me while I'm away because I think that's going to be a good show.
I'm certainly happy.
Yeah, exactly. I knew you'd like it, Garrett. But
yeah.
Anyways, now that we're 25 minutes into the show, Garrett, we should probably read from the sacred text before they get too dusty. So, of course, our main topic this evening is Final Fantasy XVI. Garrett's played it. I've played it. We've both finished the game.
Yes.
So I will preface, there will be spoiler talk in this conversation, but it will be happening later in the discussion. So we will actually be very, very pointing, be like, by the way, with flashing lights, spoilers. If you turn off the podcast now and come back to it when you've finished the game, if you don't want to be spoiled. Likewise, if you're listening on audio feeds, I've actually gone ahead and put in the description of the podcast what time the spoilers start, so you know kind of when to kind of watch out for, and things like that. So there we go. But Garrett, I want to hear from you now that first of all, I'm so proud of you. You've actually finished your first Final Fantasy game, Garrett.
I did it.
I'm so happy that it finally happened that you finished your Final Fantasy game. So I want surface level thoughts from you, Garrett. Nothing, spoiler related or kind of too deep, because we're going to go deep on this in just a second. But I want to know kind of your surface level thoughts and what this process was like actually for like a non Final Fantasy person, because I want to know.
Yeah. So. My history with Final Fantasy, as you know, it's not been very serious. I have tried out Final Fantasy IV, Final Fantasy VII multiple times, Final Fantasy X, which is I'm not gonna sorry, I'm not gonna go into the joke.
You say that, but so many people were saying Final Fantasy 16 is the best Final Fantasy since Final Fantasy X.
Oh god,
and that Final Fantasy X is better.
Such a weird joke. So I've dabbled around. I've seen what's kind of there in terms of just like what's a Final Fantasy game. I kind of know what a Final Fantasy game tropish should look like. Mainly the mascot of the game, chocobos. That's kind of big, but also it is the Final Fantasy. It's all the fantastical kind of stories and tropes that you want to put into a good fictional story from beginning to end, following a characters, following a quest, following a role, a storyline, meets other characters off to the side, world building. And I think I got all of that with Final Fantasy 16. They did such a good job of building what this world is, what the premise is, and how Clive just goes through his journey from beginning to end. I like all the themes going around just the game itself. Overall world building, very Final Fantasy like. I think for me, sometimes JRPGs can be vague, or it can be very not non-specific, and Final Fantasy is that to me. Like, I don't know, like every time I try a Final Fantasy game, I'm trying to understand it like in the first 30 minutes, and you really can't understand it until maybe mid-game. I'm not joking with you. You don't really understand what's going on with these characters or with these stories until like maybe mid to late game, to be honest with you. And I felt like this in here as well. The pacing was kind of weird for me, to be honest with you. It's a roller coaster. There's so many different things happening. There's time jumps and so on and so forth. That's my surface level thoughts so far, is that Final Fantasy it's good. It's fully realized. It's awesome. But man, it took a while for me to understand what's going on.
So what you're saying, Garrett, is it's the type of game that gets you. It's fine, but it gets really good 20 hours in, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, for this one, I would say 10 to 15 hours in. I'm like, okay, now I'm kind of getting where it's going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because a lot of Final Fantasies are kind of slow burn. kind of stories
They are.
like that,
They
where
are.
it's like they're not trying to ramp things up too quickly. They want you to kind of see all sides of the conflict and things like that, especially this game, where I like the fact that even though Cly is kind of the main character, you kind of see like a lot of different facets of the different characters. You also get to see a lot of the villains and some of the other characters that you'll run into along the way. Like I like when Final Fantasy games do that, where the focus isn't just on the main party, but also with, you know, everyone else out there and the villains too. Yeah. Like I like all the world building they do in this particular game. And honestly, as a Final Fantasy fan, Garrett, I'm not loath to disagree with the people who actually say it's the best Final Fantasy since 10, although I would of course revise that and scratch out 10 because people know I don't like Final Fantasy 10. In fact, I got a kick out of it when watching the Final Fantasy 14 keynote this week, Garrett, because people, of course, like when they were announcing some new things, Yoshi P was like, what mode do you guys want to see? And everyone in the audience yelled Blitzball, and he's like, we're never doing Blitzball. He basically just said Blitzball on like Blitzball's terrible on stage. Oh my god, it was the best thing. It's so good. But yeah, so I like, as a Final Fantasy fan, I really enjoyed this game a lot. Yes, it's a big departure gameplay wise from other Final Fantasy other Final Fantasy games, but I mean, I would say it's as much of a big departure as 15 was. And one of the things that Final Fantasy has always prided itself on, in the same way that that series like Mario is that even though the Final Fantasy games have like similar themes and other things that kind of tie the games together, they always try something different with the gameplay. And sometimes they're subtle changes, whereas sometimes they're big sweeping changes. Like we're kind of seeing here. Like they always like to do different things. Like if you compare the combat between Final Fantasy 12, Final Fantasy 13, Final Fantasy 15, and Final Fantasy 16, all four of them are very different from each other, let alone
from each other,
all the old games. Like, so that's something that's like that's something that's been consistent with the series. Like going all the way back to some of even the older games were like that as well. Where even like Final Fantasy 2, when you kind of compare it to Final Fantasy 1, is super interesting because it has this level system where the more you use specific weapons and stuff like that, the more you level up. That way, like, it didn't have a traditional leveling system in it. Because again, they were trying to do something different every single time. And that's something I've always appreciated about the series. And sometimes it's always, that's always hit or miss. Like with 15, I don't think they kind of nailed the right formula with that game. Whereas I do really like kind of the formula they have in 16. So I came away actually pretty happy with this game. I have some nitpicks, of course, and we'll get into some of those in a bit. But overall, I think it's a really solid game, and honestly, one of my favorite games of the year, if I'm being honest.
Nice.
At this point.
I want to pick up with what you said about the gameplay. It is a very good, very solid action RPG. Like it's very, well, I wouldn't say RPG, but good on the action-based combat, with the different abilities going on, and it's easy to get into, but it's hard to master, I would say. And you can clearly tell that this guy who came from the Devil May Cry series is really the masterwork of this combat, because it does really scream, like with all the bosses and everything. It's like, oh yeah, this is definitely an action focused game, and it's very fun. Even for me, which is not a huge action person, I'm not into a lot of fast kinetic type of games. This one is very easy to get into and very fun as well. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's a good segue to maybe even talk about the combat first before we talk about the story, because I think that's one of the big selling points, I think. Because the story, I think, is pretty good, but I think the combat is actually the thing that won me over the most. If I'm being honest, like, I really enjoyed the combat. Unlike you, Garrett, I am actually definitely that type of person that loves the fast action games. I love Ninja Gaiden. I love Bayonetta. I love Devil May Cry. Like, I love games like that. Like, those are my favorite style of action games. And I definitely found this game on the easier side when you compare it to those other games, which I think, to your point, Garrett, I think makes it more approachable for those that maybe aren't into that style of game to maybe get into this game a little bit better. And then that way, if you like this, then maybe you try out like one of those harder, more difficult games. and kind of transition from there. Like, I feel like it's a lot more beginner friendly. And even just on the default mode, and then you can adjust a whole bunch of things to make it even easier for you if you want to easier experience, which I think is great. Like, I think it's good that we have like a fast action game that's like this, that isn't so focused on difficulty that it drives people away.
Yeah, and also like it's really approachable in a sense of like, whenever you die in terms of a battle, in terms of a boss battle or whatever, you come back with all your potions and like it's pretty easy to get back. It's not like, oh my gosh, Shin Megami Tensei 5, I just lost here and I have to go back to my previous save. Oh, I saved like 3 hours ago. No, it's like come back like beginning of the battle with all your potions and just get into it and just kind of get through this game. Like it's fine, which is very nice to have.
Yeah, it reminds me of Celeste in that way, where even though Celeste, people talk about it as it being a really difficult game, it gives you a lot of great like options for when you die. You basically start right at the beginning of the screen there, like almost no foul, like you're instantly back in the game, kind of where you were. And I like, and this game kind of does the same thing with harnessing the power of the PlayStation 5's SSD with no loading and just having you just instantly kind of back where you were. Like, I think that was great. But
that's great.
Yeah. And I love the icon abilities as well that you get. Like in the combat for the first like couple hours is kind of boring because you really just don't have a lot of different abilities. So you're kind of just spamming the same moves all the time. But I love how complex the combat really gets when you are juggling your different icon abilities and you're cycling through like the three icons that you kind of set up in your menu. And then when you actually play New Game Plus, Garrett, what's really interesting when you start, when you start mastering all the abilities, you can then fully customize the icons and mix and match powers from other icons with your selected icon. So you can have like some of Garuda's abilities and Bahamut's abilities when you have Phoenix selected as an example, if you really like Phoenix's charge ability, and kind of the combinations that come out of that are like super interesting and cool.
Actually, I came to realize that even late game, you can do that. Like late game first playthrough, I was like, wait, you can do that? That's weird. Like,
it's only when you master an ability, having it like at its full potential.
Got it.
Those are the abilities you can do that with. But which is why I say that's mostly in New Game Plus, because at that point when you finish New Game Plus,
you got some masters.
You can fill out the entire tree, so everything gets maxed out by that.
That's very nice
because of how you'll get leveled, right? So at that point, then you just totally mix and match it with whatever skills and abilities that you like to take on the tough challenges of New Game Plus, especially if you're playing on the Final Fantasy mode, which is like a really cool kind of extension of the story that has you like increases the level cap, and you kind of level up your character all over again.
Yeah, I do want to say in terms of gameplay and all the, so when we say icons, these are like different kind of god powers that you get throughout the game, and they actually deliver much different move sets and combat abilities during these battles, and you really don't get all of them until the very end. Like you get the last one and you're facing the end, like at that point. And I would say, as you said, New Game Plus is really a place where you can showcase and maximize all that you can do with all your power and really just go through. Because I felt like the last 2 or 3 that I got of the icons were kind of just demos to me. I'm like, oh yeah, I have it, great, but like I don't have enough points to invest in it, or I haven't played enough with it to really, put it into combat or whatever. But anyways, that's one kind of major thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think again, the aim there is like, oh well, if they're expecting, you'll want to actually come back, and the game's so good, you'll want to replay it with New Game Plus because you're going to want that platinum trophy, I guess is kind of the mindset there, or at least that's just the way I like thinking about it from like what I think the developers are thinking about with a choice like that. It's probably how they do that. But I think the combat really awesome. I think the story itself, we touched on it a lot already, but I think the story is really well done. Again, it starts off a little bit slow, but I like kind of the directions the story kind of pulls and itself in as you go through the story. But I think we'll dive much more into that when we get into spoilers in a little bit. But also, Garrett, I want to know, because I know you kind of played this pretty quickly when we get towards this episode. How much of the side quests did you do? Did you all do all the side quests, a whole bunch of them, a couple of them? What did you do with those?
I probably did all of them except for like the last 10 or something like that. I did a lot of like, I think a lot of the late ones. It was getting, so side quests were initially for me kind of like one of those, pick and grab and choose and like go somewhere else type of vibe, like, oh, fetch quest, I'm gonna pick up some rocks or whatever. But really towards the end, there were some very good side quests, especially with certain side characters. It felt like that's a, Witcher caliber type of side quest. Like it developed some good character qualities, some character development, and I really enjoyed going through that particular side quest. But you really don't hit that until probably like the last, I would say 30 or 25% of the game.
Yeah, because a lot of the side quests to start are like, here's a pile of dirt. Go pick up the dirt. Or, you're in a restaurant and you're like, please bring all these
dishes.
Yeah, you're serving, plates to people for dinner. Josh has a good question in the chat. Did you do all the hunts, Garret?
I did more than half of the hunts. And I probably ran into them accidentally, like I would go into, so hunts are like kind of like, oh, there's a monster out there in a particular area. We're not going to tell you like exactly the location, but we'll tell you kind of the general area that you can go to. And it's like, okay. And then sometimes I would just go into a side quest. I'm going through an open area. All right, there's a hunt right there. There's, music going on. There's battles. I liked some of the hunts for sure. Actually, it's funny. I think the hunts were harder than the bosses.
Yeah,
like some of them are pretty rough,
especially like the S rank ones in particular.
Yeah,
like some of those
S-ranks
get
are hard.
really difficult. Yeah,
yeah.
Which is I also really like the hunts. In fact, the hunts, believe it or not, is actually a system pulled directly from Final Fantasy XIV. Because
nice.
as you get into like the later game in Final Fantasy XIV, there's hunts in all the different expansions. And they're set up similar to this, where it's just like, it'll be like, it's in this kind of area of the world and you have to go kind of find it. And they're kind of set up the same way, like with the tier rankings and rewards and everything. Like it's all pulled over. So as a Final Fantasy XIV fan, I actually really appreciated and liked the fact that the hunts were in the game. I did actually do all the hunts because I wanted to get the legendary weapon, which is one of the rewards you get for doing that. As well as there are other cool rewards that you get for doing the hunts.
Cool.
Yeah. So it was definitely worth doing. Again, we'll go into a little more specifics when we kind of get into spoilers. So in fact, we're almost there. So I'm going to actually bring in a couple questions from the community, Garret, which are not spoiler related, which is why I want to get them out of the way now. Before we kind of transition to spoiler territory. Drellesh, don't worry, your question's coming up later. Drellesh had a question about spoilers, so we'll talk about that later.
Cool.
Darstridius asks, is Final Fantasy XVI an RPG or just has very little RPG elements? Do you wish it was more of an RPG? So, Garret, we've had this discussion multiple times at this point. You and I slightly differ on this, but I feel like we're closer than I kind of give us credit for, where you're in the camp, or at least the last time we talked anyways, you were in the camp of this was more of a action game than a role-playing game, but close to an RPG. And then my stance was, it's an RPG, but it's the closest to just being a pure action game I will ever call an RPG. Is kind of my stance as well.
Yeah.
I imagine that's unchanged, right?
Yes. And again, I want to mention our objective definition in the RPG cave, what a role-playing game is. I would agree with Ryan that this is an RPG. It's just, for me, what I enjoy in RPGs is not, I don't see much in this game as much. So I don't want to call it. And also I like to compare this game to other action games that have RPG elements. And I'm like, this is very hard to convince me this is an RPG. That being said, it is very much a Final Fantasy game, though.
Oh,
it
100%.
yeah, I don't want to deter anyone that's like, oh man, this is not a Final Fantasy game. Then it's like, no, this is about as Final Fantasy as you can get in this day and age in terms of themes and stories and whatever. So yeah.
I mean, I'm going to make the argument that it's more of a Final Fantasy game than Final Fantasy 15 ever was, and people never questioned whether or not that was a Final Fantasy game. So just throwing that out there as a thing at this point. But yeah, as far as Dark Strides' other question, do you wish it had more RPG elements? Absolutely. I wish there were a little bit more to it. But I fear that if they muddled up the systems with too many RPG elements, Garret, and tell me if I'm wrong on this part, like I feel like it might bog down the gameplay to where it might just be unfun. I think that might wreck the balance a little bit.
You know what? I'm gonna go opposite on this. The way this game is built, it's not meant to have too many RPG elements.
True.
And I think it's a very good game on its own, and I just wish it just fixed some pacing issues and maybe kind of relax some or spread out the important side quest a little bit more, spread out or like give us the abilities a little. Or my gripes are more about the pacing of the gameplay and revealing and the stories and whatever. It's not about, oh my gosh, I'm not crafting a special weapon, or like, oh, I'm not making a parallelogram out of my crystals to give me 3% damage, or you know what I mean? Like I don't I'm not missing that in this game. So yeah, I would say I don't want more complicated RPG elements than it already has. I just wish it just came in a little earlier.
Yeah, for sure. Like I do think it eventually, like as you progress through the game, it gets more. You start to explore some more of the RPG elements, and I think that's why again I feel like it's kind of in that camp where it's RPG enough for me, anyways. I don't need it. Probably need to be more of an RPG. But, and then next up, Nagachaka says, which game is better, Final Fantasy 16 or Final Fantasy 7 Remake, and why is it Final Fantasy 7 Remake? And then Yarden follows up this question by saying, follow up to Nagachaka's question, which game is better, Final Fantasy 16 or Final Fantasy 7 Remake? And your answer to the previous question, or Final Fantasy 6, and why is it Final Fantasy 6? So,
my goodness,
it's so many layers, Garret. It's so many layers on top of layers.
Like Final Fantasy onion, like my goodness.
I think they're just two very, very different games. I mean, I'll speak from the Final Fantasy fans' perspective, where Final Fantasy VII Remake is more of the traditional Final Fantasy experience that I'm personally looking for. But I'm going to say 16 is a better game. 100%. I think 16 is a much better game than Final Fantasy VII Remake. But, I mean, there are pacing issues in 16 that we're going to talk about in spoilers.
Yes.
But, man, if you want a game with pacing issues, Final Fantasy VII Remake is a game with glaring pacing issues.
Oh, really?
That just totally break up the flow of that game for me. That combined with the fact that I am not overly in love with the Nomura style section of the story they added to it, that just feels like filler to me in kind of the worst kind of ways, because it feels like Kingdom Hearts filler, which is never a good thing for me.
Oh, no.
I don't like Kingdom Hearts. So the fact that they're kind of putting Kingdom Hearts in my Final Fantasy VII just kind of, makes me a little bit sad. So I actually think Final Fantasy 16 is a much more cohesive game, and honestly, just a better game quality wise overall. And honestly, if I was to go back and play one of the games, it's honestly probably Final Fantasy 16 is probably the one I'd actually replay first, despite the fact that I am actually gearing up at some point to do a 7 Remake replay before Rebirth comes out next year.
I'll play with you.
Oh, we could play together. And then as far as Final Fantasy 6 Yarden, of course, Final Fantasy 6 is like the GOAT. It's one of the best games of all time. So of course, I think Final Fantasy 6 objectively is a better game than 16 will ever be. But
all right, great. I don't have I have a non-answer for you guys. I have not played 7 Remake.
Well, one of them you've only finished. One of them you finished, and you haven't finished either one of the other ones. So clearly, 16 is the better game.
Yeah, 16 is a better game. So suck it, Yarden.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And Nagachaka as well. He also asked the question.
Yeah, sorry, Nagachaka.
Yeah. To Drellesh's point, Tifa can't even save Final Fantasy VII. I love Tifa in Final Fantasy VII Remake. And yeah, she couldn't even save that game for me. And again, I don't hate Final Fantasy VII Remake. I think it's a great game too. There's just a lot more stuff I don't like about it when you compare it to Final Fantasy 16. And I just honestly, I just had more fun playing Final Fantasy 16. I think it was just an overall better experience for me. So there you go. Yeah, and that's coming from someone who loves Final Fantasy 7, which just hurts me to say a little bit. But I don't know. All right, Garrett, before we move on to spoilers, last thing I'm going to ask you, is there anything you want to touch on that we haven't touched on already before we talk spoilers with this?
Yeah, I think a big thing we haven't really mentioned is the kind of, I would say, two separate subjects. One is how freaking beautiful this game is in terms of its graphics and cinematography and its presentation, with just everything, from boss battles to just going into the world and like these villages or whatever, and going into combat. They really nailed it in terms of just like what a magic ability kind of looks like, or a melee ability, and then like going to dodge, and like, the sound effects, and then even the grand boss icon battles that you get in this game. What a masterpiece this thing is in terms of that. Like, it is so beautiful to look at. It's just gorgeous. So I just want to let everyone know, like, you're in for a treat in terms of its kind of its presentation of combat battles and story and whatever. It's a gorgeous game, I think, and one of the best looking games.
That's a great point. It's honestly one of the, you're right. Like, it's one of the most beautiful current gen games. Period.
Yes.
Full stop.
Period.
Which is also crazy to think about, the fact that the engine for this game is a modified version of the Final Fantasy XIV engine. Like, it's the same engine that powers Final Fantasy XIV, but it's just modified, of course, because it doesn't have to account for 300 players on screen at once, kind of thing.
That's true. Yeah.
Like, they can do a lot more with it. And also, of course, I got to give the shout out to Soken, of course, Soken, the composer for the music in Final Fantasy XVI.
The music is amazing as well. Yeah,
the music is so good throughout the entire game, especially with a lot of the icons and things like that too. But like, just a lot of themes you get throughout the game, and even just the way that Soken also brings in musical themes from older Final Fantasy games and kind of trickles them in there without doing like straight covers of old ones. Although you do get kind of the classic Final Fantasy theme kind of done in the style. But I love the music throughout this game. And of course, Soken, known famously for being the composer of Final Fantasy XIV, and all the music from that game, all like 700 songs for Final Fantasy XIV, which is just crazy to think about. It's so much music. I love this. I actually can't wait for the soundtrack to actually go on Spotify, Garrett, because I will actually listen to it all the time, just like I do with the Final Fantasy XIV music whenever I'm working. So nice. I love the soundtrack. I think it's great. So yeah, I think those are two things we wanted to kind of hit on. But I think now, Garrett, we should make the transition. Blink, blink, blink. This is everyone's spoiler warning. I'm going to give everyone 10 to 20 seconds right now. I'm going to time it right now to turn off the podcast, of course. Of course, make sure to like the video and all that good stuff. And of course, come back next week when Garrett has more stuff to talk about. That is not spoiler related to Final Fantasy XIV. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, Garrett, here now we have transitioned to full spoilers. Your spoiler warning is over, and I've stalled long enough. So Garrett, I'm going to ask you the first spoiler that I'm going to just throw out there. What was the best icon battle? What was your favorite icon battle?
The best icon battle. Oh man, hold on. I got the icon list up. I know exactly which one I love. I just want to make sure I get the name right. It's just been a while. Yeah. It's Bahamut. Yeah. It's definitely Bahamut. Like that's the most epic icon battle or just boss battle I've ever been in.
Yeah. It goes to space. It's the only boss battle in space.
It goes to space, man. We're flying around. He is shooting bombs and whatever left and right. Yeah. I felt like I was.
And you merge with Phoenix, and you get, for the first time, you get like Phoenix's abilities on as well as Ifrit's abilities, and it's like, oh my god, this is so cool.
Yeah, I felt like I was a transformer, just like doing ultimate Dragon Ball Z moves that is out in space, and man, just going up in space and then just going back down, just free falling back down. Oh man. Yeah, Bahamut was by far my favorite one. The other ones were great too. I think shout out to the final battle, Ultima. That was a very great battle as well. I think everything else was just okay for me. It was great. It was some great battles.
I was gonna say the one that disappointed me, because like in the moment I was super jacked for this particular fight, but then as I got into it and realized all you were doing in it, I was actually really disappointed. And that was Titan, because Titan was a fight I was actually really looking forward to, because I love that kind of all the buildup that they had for it. And I love the music track that they had during the Titan fight. Like, I thought that was super cool. And again, very reminiscent of the music from Final Fantasy XIV, because you actually fight Titan in Final Fantasy XIV, and it has a similar song, like a similar music choice, but also there's a lot of visual elements that are pulled from that fight as well, in the Titan fight. So I as a Final Fantasy XIV fan, like, I appreciated that, and I think that fight is well choreographed. But man, it was so boring being like, all right, I get a couple hits in and then I dodge, and then do a couple more hits as I run up his arm, and then I dodge, and then I avoid some stuff. It was just, I don't know. It was like such a boring fight when you consider what you're doing.
Yeah.
But even though I was bored by the gameplay, I loved kind of the music and just the vibe. I felt like I felt hyped while doing that fight, despite the fact that
definitely
all the actions I was doing were very boring. So
yeah, it was very quick time event related. It was like, going on these tentacles that I don't even know. I was like, wait, how am I fighting this thing? that was the one thing I was like, wait, how am I attacking it? Or like, do I have to do something? And then it was like eventually towards the end, I'm like, oh, okay, this kind of makes sense how this is gonna roll out. Yeah, Titan, I'm hearing, is the one that's the most disappointing icon battle out of all of them. It wasn't, as you said, it wasn't like in terms of gameplay, it was not fantastic or whatever, but in terms of just like how the build up of that battle and kind of the cool down, I really enjoyed those parts, and the interactions between Hugo and Clive throughout that. Oh my gosh. The way Clive just owned him killing Garuda, and just like, hey, I killed the one you loved, and he just got so mad and just laughed and maniacally. I'm like, I love it so much. And it was like, we're getting ready to battle. So anyways, that was good stuff.
Yeah. And I will say, like, one of the things I was a little bit disappointed with in the game as far as icons is, like, I really wanted a really cool icon battle with Odin, and we didn't.
Me too.
I'm like,
so weird.
I don't get me wrong, I love the boss battle that you get out of that instead of the icon battle that we should have gotten with Odin.
Yeah.
But man, I'm just like, that's a missed opportunity right there. Like, that would have been so, I can only imagine how cool that battle would have been.
Yeah, big guy with a horse flying all around. I'm like, dang, I want it. I can't wait till I had the same thought. It's like, I wish I had this icon. When I was like, oh, Barnabas slain, I'm like, wait, what? This is the end? Like, am I going to the next boss? That's interesting.
Still, like, I love like the Barnabas battle in the rain on top of the hill. Like, that was such a cool fight. But I still, like, I really wish we got like an actual like battle versus Odin. I think that would have been super cool, especially because, again, like, Odin's one of the coolest Final Fantasy VIIs, so I would have loved to battle him. And same with Shiva as well, despite the fact that Shiva is on our side, obviously. But I mean, we like a boss battle with her would make no sense. But I still would have loved to fight Shiva as well. But all the icon battles are pretty cool. Like, even some of the early ones, like the Garuda battle was pretty cool.
Garuda was cool. Yeah.
Like, and when you revisit kind of the Phoenix battle, I think that was really cool too. So I like a lot of the icon battles, and just the boss battles in general. I found like all of them, even like the smaller bosses were really cool. Like one of my favorites was actually fighting Behemoth for the first time. That was like the big kind of like dog creature that summons meteors and stuff.
Yeah.
And then you fight him as like a normal enemy and you're like, oh, there's just Behemoth just running around summoning meteors. That's cool.
Yeah, the Behemoth was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did like all the mini bosses as well. I like getting into it and then like figuring out how to stagger these big bosses pretty well. Like I really got the hang of it. I would say second half of the game. I'm like, okay, I know how to. And it's it's a lot of action games do this, but I think they do it really well here. It's like they have a system of moves and they kind of tell you, oh, this move is about to happen, or you kind of know choreographically what's gonna happen with a boss battle, and so you know how to dodge, you know how to block, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I like a lot of the mini bosses as well.
Yeah. Oh, look, Garrett, I figured out in Melon how to put up a little spoiler tag.
You did it.
I pressed the
Right
button,
there.
and now that's just gonna sit there and say spoilers, just in case anyone actually wanders in here and is like, "Oh, I didn't know people were gonna spoil this game despite the fact that it says it on the thumbnail." Moving on, Garrett. So we talked about the bosses and how much we liked. Of course, the final boss Ultima was really cool. But what did you think overall of Ultima the villain? Because like, I feel like we just didn't see enough of him for me to really honestly feel one way or the other about Ultima. Like, I thought he was kind of like a do nothing villain. Like I thought the other villains you actually had in the story were better. Like Clive's mom was a great villain. Barnabas was a great villain. Hugo was like, I feel like they were way stronger than Ultima.
Yeah, I think Ultima was this kind of all true solution to the ending. Is like, how do we end this in the most epic way? And they're like, I know. It's gonna be God in some form of fashion. I'm like, guys, there's so many things you could do. And like I understand JRPGs go into this route, but Ultima,
it's also a callback to old Final Fantasy games because Ultima is one of the enemies that you'll fight in older Final Fantasy games, like one of the final bosses. Like in Final Fantasy II, Ultima is the final boss, or Final Fantasy Tactics. Ultima is the final boss in that as well, and a couple other Final Fantasy games are like that. In fact, you also fight Ultima in Final Fantasy XIV is one of the big final raid bosses of a raid.
So he's a well-known villain, but yeah, in terms of within Final Fantasy 16, I agree with you. I did not understand what, like, I knew he was this kind of all true being, but like, what's the purpose of him? And like going through this, and it really doesn't open up until like the basically when you encounter him.
He doesn't really explain why he's doing like what he's doing until like the end of the game, like the last battle basically, and it's like, oh, cool.
Well, yeah, I think
I'm gonna destroy the world and then make my own paradise for just me.
Yeah, I think when I defeated Hugo, they were getting into a scene with Barnabas and his assistant or whatever, and they were talking about mythos. And like I was like, and like going with the boss, or that's where I kind of made the connection right there. It's like, oh, they're kind of going with Ultima. And he wasn't called Ultima. He was just like some, whatever higher being. And then it's like, okay, they're figuring out how to like make the main character powerful, like stuffing a turkey. No
Pretty
joke,
much.
sucking the abilities all around. So but
they had to have a reason for it, because of course you were to become Ultima's vessel, so he could have all the powers of the icons, so then he could make his own world and escape and destroy the old one, and so he could just live by himself in paradise, I guess.
That's weird.
Yeah,
this is very tropey. Yeah, I wish it. I agree with you. I wish it was another villain that was towards the end, other than just this god that wanted to destroy humanity. I'm just like,
well, especially because again, when you compare him to the other villains in the game, or also when I compared as a longtime Final Fantasy fan to a lot of the bosses in old Final Fantasy games, like when I compare him to Kefka from Final Fantasy VI, or Emmett Selk from Final Fantasy XIV, like he just doesn't nearly match up with any of the older Final Fantasy villains at all. Like he's kind of like like a less charismatic Sephiroth, because at least Sephiroth, you feel like you understand Sephiroth's motives and stuff, despite the fact that you also in the original Final Fantasy VII you barely see Sephiroth throughout most of the game. You hear about Sephiroth, but you don't really see him all that much. And I kind of felt the same way about Ultima in this game, where it's just like you don't really see Ultima that much, and when you see him, it's just like cool. So he's just trying to take over Clive's body, and that's all we kind of know.
Cool. Yeah, pretty much. And then there wasn't a plot twist with him much at all. So that's okay.
Yeah. Of course. I'm gonna ask you this. Did you have a favorite side quest, Garrett? And we can go into spoilers about side quests in particular.
Yeah,
because I'll give you time to think. I'll bring up mine because there was one right outside the palace that was about this like rich father and his kid, and what they were doing is they were basically buying up branded slaves basically, and then using them for their own amusement, like as their own pets, and
sending them off
to fight this beast basically that kept like sending them off to these wolves that kept murdering them because they were doing that for fun. And like that whole quest line just felt like a Witcher 3 quest line in a way, where it had like it was just like this really grim and dark story of course the worst parts of humanity like on full on display. And I love kind of with that quest as well, like how they kind of get their comeuppance toward the end, where they're like, all right, we need to get an even bigger beast in order to kill Clive, and then the bigger beast just ends up eating them. So that was one of my favorite ones, because again, it just was so different and interesting when you compare it to a lot of the other side quests in the game, that it really stood out for me. Like it's still one I think about when I think about the side quests in that game.
Yeah, that was the good one. I definitely remember that one, and I also remember the one next to it where it was this little girl that was looking for her pet.
Yeah,
and like going off, and then you figure out that the pet was actually a bearded or a branded, sorry. And you're like, oh, this is messed up. This is like super dark type of route. So yeah, that one was interesting. I did like the eye for an eye one. I don't know if you played that side quest, but basically it was Kern, the merchant, and you kind of develop a lot of her background and her story leading up to her going into the hideaway, and how much goats or whatever that character's name is with her like all the time and interacting with her. Yeah, Kern, definitely a not so good past. Definitely, was more, and understandably self-centered, wanted to be more profitable than doing anything for good or for evil or whatever. She just did what she had to do. And then you kind of like figure out in the end of that quest, it's like, okay, she has learned that she likes to be with the branded and with the hideaway, and is doing things for good now. So that's good. I really enjoyed that side quest and her development of that character, for sure. Yeah.
Nice. Those are some good picks, Garrett. Lots of good side quests in that game. Like I said, even though there were a lot of like dull kind of side quests, there were some good ones throughout the story that I really enjoyed. And also I liked kind of the final side quest you go on with Joshua and Jill, where I love kind of their it kind of like caps off their storylines as well, and then you get like the holding hands mechanic where they're basically in your party for the rest of the game, basically.
Oh, nice.
The end of the game, which was pretty cool.
Cool.
Which I don't. Yeah, it sounds like you didn't do those ones because they were some of the last ones you do.
Yeah.
But yeah, kind of. I like how they kind of wrapped up their individual stories. Because again, you get some great conversations with Jill and Joshua when doing those quests, which was pretty
nice.
Cool. There's also even a quest too where you go on this little shopping errand, and you get to choose whether you have Jill or Tarja actually accompany you.
I remember that. Yeah.
And depending on which choice you make, you get like an additional like 5-minute kind of thing of dialogue with whoever you kind of picked. It doesn't really affect anything else with the story throughout the game, but I thought that was interesting that they had like a choice-based one in there. I chose Tarja, by the way, because I wanted to learn more about her. because you had Jill for most of the game. I'm like, oh, I want to learn about this person.
Yeah, it was interesting for me. I picked Jill. I was like, wait, Clive is going to no, like gonna have interactions with Jill more, or with Tarja, which they don't really interact too much. I mean, they do, but like it's Jill and Clive are a thing. So
Yeah.
I was like, okay, let me just choose Jill and see what interactions I get at. And I think the other one was Otto and what's the other guy's name? The blind eye, and he goes out scouting. I forgot his name.
Gav.
But Gav. Yeah. But anyways, yeah, I would say again later in the side quest, very good. I like the side quest with the blacksmith, in his town, and his kind of. It's pretty cool that they like. Oh, this is where these side characters within your hideaway come from.
Yeah.
And that one was pretty good too. Yeah. So
nice. Well, I'm gonna bring in Josh, who asked the
go,
question:
Josh.
how did you interpret the ending of Final Fantasy XVI, and what stories would you want the upcoming DLCs to focus on? Because this gives us a good time as any, Garrett. Because we're running a little bit long here. What did we think about the ending of this game, and kind of how did we interpret the ending? So, I mean, honestly, I know there's a lot of theories out there about certain characters alive or being alive, or certain characters being dead. I honestly thought that the game was kind of playing these days, who survived and who didn't. Where I think there's a possibility Joshua survived at the end.
Oh, really?
But
okay.
I think there's a possibility of that, but I think it is unlikely. I think Joshua and Clive are both dead. Like
I think both are clearly dead.
Yeah. I think Clive for sure, because Clive's like body is falling apart at the end, and I'm like, people out there are like, oh well, when Jill's looking out and like the star kind of flashes, she's like, oh, that's a sign that Clive somehow survived. His body like falling apart because he had no ether left, and I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure Clive is dead, like 100% dead.
Yeah, he definitely sacrificed himself. That was definitely a thing, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with you. Joshua and Clive, I think they're dead too.
Yeah. Joshua, the only reason why I think it's possible that he's alive is because Clive did cast the magic on him to try and resurrect him, which of course Joshua mentions in the story that you can revive and heal the body, but you can't put the soul back in. But because he actually gives them the Phoenix Feather, and the Phoenix Feather seems to react in some way, combined with the end, the post credit scene, provided that you saw the post credit scene, Garrett.
Yeah,
with the novel that of course we knew that Joshua was writing. I think it's possible that Joshua survived, but it's also just entirely possible that he left the book with Jill, and then Jill, put that out there with his stories of their adventure, because that was something that Joshua was writing the whole time, was his adventures, and he talks about that more actually in the final Joshua side quest that you do with him.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
Like that's where that book comes from. But I love the idea where it's like magic is kind of like the thing destroying the world. So the thing that basically fixes that is like Clive just takes the magic away and he just fixes everything.
Yeah, he takes away the magic, and then like post credit scene. That's how I interpret it too, is that the book was kind of passed down, kind of a story, generations or whatever, and now there's a world without magic, and there's just a family and a couple kids just playing around with the dog, which is great.
The kids, of course, very reminiscent of Joshua and Clive, of course.
Yes,
but they do that on purpose.
Yeah, definitely. So I don't see much other way. Do you think there's going to be DLC with this Final? They said they weren't going to have any, or
Yoshi
they didn't
P
plan.
did originally say that, but they've also been hinting at there might actually be something after all.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, if there is anything, I imagine that if there's DLC, you're gonna maybe play as Jill in the DLC.
Yeah,
is what I could see happening.
Yeah.
Or the DLC might be something like Final Fantasy 15 did, where they had like in Final Fantasy 15 for this DLC, they had character specific DLCs based on the other members of your party. So like the Noctis, not Noctis, but the other members of the party beside Noctis had their own individual story chapters. So maybe they do something like that. But I think if they do DLC at all, I think you'll probably play as Jill, is kind of my thought process. Or they might do something where you play as the other side characters, or you play as Clive in some kind of story that takes place before the final ending. Because I don't think they're going to do like a Fallout 4 DLC where they change the ending. Josh also brings up in the chat that maybe they do a Gav DLC. They might do a Gav DLC, or maybe they could even do like a prequel DLC with something like Sid.
Oh man,
like
was it Dion? Is that his name? Bahamut?
Yeah,
the Bahamut guy.
They could do something like that too.
I would love to know his background. I don't think we got enough of him.
Yeah,
we got like we didn't even know him until really like was talking to his dad, and then also Clive's mother at the time. That was really after the second time jump, really into the game, and I'm like, who is this guy? And then he is the most epic icon battle. And he is also one of the best companions, and towards the end he helps Joshua and Clive. I would definitely like a DLC from him. Just what's his upbringing, because we get hints of like him being not like a very high bloodline, like his mother is just a low level whatever in the society. So I'm curious of what he is more like.
It'd also be it'd be really interesting to see more of him, but he's also dead too at the end, so it's just like,
oh, he's definitely dead.
It would also have to again be like a story pre thing. I think like either they do something with Gav, or they do something with Jill, or it's a prequel. Like I think that's what they do if they do other DLC. Again, I actually would be interested to see like a pre-story DLC with Sid, like seeing how Sid got things started.
That's true.
Would be interesting.
Yeah, and I would like see if it was gonna be that. I want it to be more resource management based, because you're building a hideaway, you're building what it's gonna be, and I would like to have. See, that makes sense of more RPG mechanics in terms of resource management than anything else. But I doubt they'll do anything like that.
Probably nothing like too crazy as far as changing up the combat system, which is also like. I also wonder how they would even do the combat in the DLC, even when you're not playing as Clive, which is why I thought like a dominant, playing as a dominant of some kind would make sense, whether you're playing as Jill or Sid, or even like one of the other characters that are dominants. Like I think that would be like, maybe you do like a Barnabas, like early like prequel DLC kind of thing. Like I think like something like that is maybe the direction they go in to kind of keep the combat sort of congruent with the rest of it. That's part of the reason why I don't think it'll be Gav, because I think like they'd have to make the combat.
It has to be a dominant based, type of deal.
Yeah. Although any sequel DLC that they would do, like if you're playing as Jill in like a sequel DLC, like a post story DLC, like she wouldn't have any of her magic out anyways. So. I wonder how they would even handle that.
There's really no, that we know of, no magic after Clive, kind of just did that. So
they do confirm that with the post credit scene. So at that point, like I don't see what they. That's why I'm like, I almost feel like I would actually probably be less excited if they did DLC than just leaving the ending the way it is, because I personally don't feel like. Like I feel like the ending did enough to kind of cap off the story where I almost would be less excited about DLC. Like and likewise, I don't think they should ever really do a sequel to this game either. If they were ever to do if they were ever to explore the space or this world again, then it'd probably have to be a prequel in order to kind of keep things interesting. But maybe do something with like Clive and Joshua's father or something like that. If you do like a prequel, but. Again, I don't really think it needs it.
I do want to. This is probably this is non-spoiler. This is more just technical wise. It's so interesting. We get into the cutscenes of like major side quests and the main quests or whatever, and Clive and the other side characters look really good in terms of just models and animations or whatever. It looks very good. and then I go to just a random side quest. I feel like I'm looking at a 3D animation class project type of deal going on, where it's just simple movements, simple mouth gestures or whatever of what they're saying. I'm like, wow, like it's not bad, but like it's you can see the level of difference between what they put in effort that they put into and what they did not put into.
That's kind of the Final Fantasy 14 effect a little bit, because
I see.
that's what this, like the side quests kind of feel that way in Final Fantasy 14. And
I see.
again, this is still Creative Business Unit 3 kind of doing their thing. So yeah, that's kind of where I think that's the place that comes from a little bit. It's just like likewise, that's part of the reason why I think the main story is told so well and is so cinematic, because they did that, like as the expansions rolled on for Final Fantasy 14, they became more and more like that, to the point where when you play Endwalker, like all of the story cutscenes, and there's a lot of cutscenes in Endwalker. In fact, it's almost more cutscenes than gameplay in that expansion, are all like the cutscenes in Final Fantasy 16. It's not obviously as gorgeous of a game, but it's all of them are well choreographed with different camera angles, and the characters are very lively, and they all are fully voiced and whatnot.
Cool. Sounds good. Yeah.
Cool. Well, is there anything else spoiler related you want to talk about before we wrap up the show for the night, Garrett?
Yeah, I think overall I really enjoyed this game. It's so interesting how they just get into the story, and then you kind of don't really understand it until again, like I didn't understand fully aware until like 10, 15 hours in, maybe even the second time jump. I'm like, okay, this is where it is. I do want to mention some great, just, characters out there. Of course, Sid, coming in there and being a role model for Clive and like directing him in towards being with the Hideaway and with the Branded and all that good stuff. I also want to shout out to Jill. Jill had a great kind of presence mid game with her type of motivations and taking over certain kind of like territories or whatever, or breaking one of the mother crystals. That was super cool. Other than that, the writing was very good in this game. It's very hard to find very good, type of writing like this. It's very high quality, very high caliber. I definitely love the end of this game. The last sentence coming from Clive is like, because Ultima, he's trying to like, take over his body or whatever, and like trying to destroy the world, and humanity. And it's like I'm creating my fantasy into reality or whatever, and then Clive's like, no, this is your fantasy, and you're the final witness to bear it, and just throws this. So I'm like, yeah, that's epic. That's super epic. So overall, I enjoyed my time with this game. I just wanted to speak out a little bit more. So much to this game.
Again, like Creative Business Unit 3, just as we talked about before on other shows, like their writing team there, like slam dunk every time they read up, like ever since Heaven's Ward, which is the first expansion for Final Fantasy 14 came out, like their writing has just been off the charts good with everything that they've done, like with all the expansions for 14 and now with 16. Like I can't wait to see what they do next, like like with Dawn Trail coming out next year. But then also I think they're gonna probably do another Final Fantasy game at Creative Business Unit 3. Like,
I bet.
I don't see why they wouldn't at this point. So like I think they're like the golden goose of Square Enix at this point. Like they're the LeBron James or the Kobe Bryant. Like they're probably gonna have them do like every Final Fantasy game probably going forward, or at least they'll be like one of the two main teams on like the mainline franchise in addition to 14 at this point.
So do they have, I'm very interested, because do they have like English writers there, or do they translate it somehow? Because the English like wording and just the vocabulary and the sentence structure is so good too. I'm interested to know more.
The writer does not write in English, but they have their localizers work all in house there, kind of like what Nintendo does. So So at that point they do like that's how they do it. Like they do all the localization internally at their studio.
I understand. Okay, so yeah, they're very involved with the writers of
they don't
the
farm it out to anyone else or anything like that. No, it's like even though the main writer isn't writing in English, like it's translated very, very well. Which again, like it's just
it definitely
translated over from 14 for sure. Like definitely, but
cool.
Yeah. And like I said, like also people out there, if you like the story in this game, even though it's hard for me to recommend because it's 200 hours long, you would probably love the story in 14. Like, because it's not similar to this story, but like because it's much more of a even more Final Fantasy than the story that's in this game. But just the writing, the characters, the villains themselves are just much more compelling in a game like that. Like I think this story is honestly one of the best parts about Final Fantasy 14. So I think people who like the story here would definitely really enjoy the story in 14 as well, despite the fact that it's an MMO. So just wanted to give that shout out as well. All right, Garrett, I think that's going to do it for this Final Fantasy 16 conversation. Like I've got 14 on my brain now, so I'm just thinking about it all the time. And I think that's going to do it for the RPG Cave tonight. But before we go, Garrett, plugs go.
You can follow me at Twitter.
You mean X?
At Bland Explosion. All right. And then you can also find me on the Discord. I am very active on, I would say, PC Gaming, RPG Cave. I look at Xbox Drive. I look at your PlayStation ponies sometimes over there. So just, hit me up. And then, just be on the lookout for announcements. Certainly, I would say next Monday, but we will definitely have an announcement of, I'm going to go through my discussion of Atelier Remake Murray. And just, give my thoughts about that game.
Nice. Garrett, one thing I forgot to do before I go to my things. I forgot to assign you a game because remember I was supposed to do that.
Oh yeah. Sounds good. What do you want me to do? What's my homework? What's my August project?
Garrett, you will be playing according to How Long to Beat, a 9.5 hour game.
Oh, thank you.
You are playing the cinematic RPG, Parasite Eve. It is finally happening. Someone else besides me is playing Parasite Eve, and that person's Garrett Bland.
Hold on. I'm very curious if I have it on my Vita.
It's a PS1 game, and it's on the PlayStation Store for $5 if you don't.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. All right. I want to see if it even turns on.
Because it'll either be on your Vita or you got, of course, your other...
I got my Steam Deck.
Yeah, your Steam Deck. Play it there. So, and then, Garrett... once you've finished it, we will do a Parasite Eve episode of the RPG Cave. I willed this into existence. I'm so excited to hear what you have to say about this game.
That's a short game.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's a survival horror role-playing game. You probably don't want to make it too long. But it also, like, the way the story takes place, it takes place over 6 days leading up to Christmas, because it's of course a Christmas game. It's traditional kind of like Resident Evil length, which the reason why I thought of this one, even though of course I wanted just an excuse for you to play Parasite Eve, Garrett. The other reason I knew that this would actually be a good time for you to play it is because you played those Resident Evil games and really liked them too. So
yeah, I did play. I went through RE2, which was very good, very high quality. I'm glad that was my first RE game.
And even though this is a PlayStation 1 game, Garrett, I mean, it's one of those things where I know, other than Final Fantasy VII, you really haven't played any PlayStation 1 role-playing games. So I felt like this would be a good choice.
Yeah. Sounds good, man. I can't
there
wait.
You go. After the break, we will talk about Parasite Eve. I'm so excited for that. I'm just excited to hear what you think about this game. Like what direction you go in. But as for me, you can find me over on X at Ryan Turford. You can also find us on X as Carpool Gaming. We're also right here at youtube.com/Carpool Gaming. Of course, podcast services around the globe. So for Garrett Bland, I'm Ryan Turford. This has been the 103rd level of the RPG Cave, and the last for at least a little while. And we're out.
Bye-bye. See you later, guys.